Welcome to the Short and Sassy Podcast with Simone de Haas and part 1 of Vulnerability is the New Visibility. This episode was recorded in front of a live audience as part of the Short and Sassy podcast launch. So I want you to imagine that you're in a space, the space where we can't actually travel right at the moment, the theatre. I just want you to close your eyes and imagine you're sitting in a theatre along with 2,000 people. Got that picture? And then the lights come up. Close every door to me. Hide all the world from me. Bar all the windows and shut out the light. Do what you want with me. Hate me and laugh at me. Darken my daytime and torture my night. In the illustrious words of Robin Archer, we must all have the courage to sing and the courage to sing praises. For many people, singing is an even more vulnerable act than speaking. We don't sing publicly because we're afraid of judgment. And we don't say what we truly desire to say because we're afraid of judgment. Even today, while I was preparing for the launch of this podcast, I had a moment when that little voice inside said, "Don't do it. Put it off. Postpone it. The world is in turmoil. No one is interested. No one cares." And I turned to that voice because, we all have that one, don't we? Our internal critic, that voice of judgment. And I said, "I'm hearing you and I'm ignoring you." And I reminded myself that my voice matters. And that even when every door appears closed to me, there is still light, my light. And it's time to share that and say, it's okay to be vulnerable. Vulnerability is the new visibility. Many years ago, I was put forward for a role with an iconic Queensland company as executive assistant to the managing director. They were looking for someone creative and out of the box, as there are a lot of in-house events and such to organise. Now, in order to test our mettle, the company asked each candidate to create a 15-minute presentation on why we were best suited for the role. 15 minutes speaking about ourselves. And then the penny dropped. I was returning to corporate work after a space of 3 years acting, directing and producing theatre. Surely I could manage 15 minutes. I was used to auditioning. I'd been doing that for years. So what was this but another audition? And what do you do when you go to an audition? Well, you sing, of course. So in front of a panel of 6 people, I sang my introduction to me, complete with MGM fanfare backing track. They sat there around that boardroom table listening, shocked and open-mouthed. They applauded and I got the job. What makes you feel vulnerable is different for everyone. For me, it's a willingness to show up with the courage and resilience in receiving whatever judgments come my way. You can receive judgment or you can put up a wall. But if you do, that also keeps out the magic. So what if someone else's judgment of you could earn you millions or get you a job? Receiving praise is also an act of vulnerability. When it's genuine, it means that the person has looked deep into the truth of who you are. So I invite you to start looking beyond your surface level judgments of you and others. You may be surprised at who and what you find. Because when you speak your truth, you unmask your authentic self. So we can show up, we can show off, or we can show ourselves. And when we practice the art of being visible through vulnerability, we embrace everything that makes us who we are, warts and all. In fact, I even said those very words in that interview. This is who I am, warts and all. I'm theatrical, I'm emotional, I'm creative, I'm happy in my skin. And if you don't like who I am, I'm okay with that. It means that I won't be a good fit for you. It means that I would have to diminish me to work with you. And that won't work for me. The managing director mentioned after that interview that it was precisely because I had chosen to do something so risky that he felt I was the perfect candidate. Being yourself is the ultimate vulnerability in a world that values image over authenticity. In the musical Cats, Grisabella appears ragged, old, and invisible. The other cats judge her for her looks and her age. They refuse to see her true spirit and chase her away, making her an outcast. When the leader of the cat tribe, Deuteronomy, announces he will give out an extra life, the other cats become increasingly desperate to prove their own worth and deserving of that honour. In contrast, Grisabella is raw, fragile and vulnerable in her aloneness and shows up saying, I've nothing to offer except myself. Deuteronomy is able to look beyond her exterior and gives her the extra life as a reward for her willingness to be herself. The true you has a depth that most people never really get close to. Maybe because you won't let them, and maybe because they aren't willing to know themselves and so cannot know you. Being raw and vulnerable creates a space that invites people in. The visibility that comes from that depth of connection is irreplaceable and irresistible. It's more powerful than any business card, any advertising campaign, or any Insta story you might present, thinking it will take you further. Being raw and vulnerable requires us to take off our masks. And taking off our mask can be intense because it removes the mystique that others may imagine that they love. In The Phantom of the Opera, the Phantom wears a mask to create mystique and seduces a beautiful young woman with his voice. When she ultimately rips his mask off, it causes him incredible pain as his facial disfigurement is exposed. And in that moment of complete clarity, she sees all of him, the man rather than the mask, the heart rather than the magic and the mystery. Her love for him doesn't diminish. She knows the beauty underneath that disfigurement, also comes to know the wounded child underneath that veneer of power. His childhood of being taunted and bullied has left greater scars than his physical disfigurement. And just like the Phantom, we imagine our vulnerability disfigures us. And so we add layer upon layer of pretense on top of the weaknesses and woundings that are not yet healed. What if our vulnerability offers us the choice to be fully empowered instead? You've been listening to the Short and Sassy Podcast with Simone de Haas. Listen to part 2 for some actionable strategies to help you make the courageous choice of vulnerability.